Hey guys, welcome back for another time-lapse tutorial. Today I'll be going over a hair study in graphite. In our material list, I have the Derwents and the Faber-Castell pencils I'm using, which are in the HB, 2B, 4B, and 8B grades. I'm also using the Mono Zero eraser, kneaded eraser, electric eraser, and brush. When I create my outline for my hair drawings, I am looking at the clusters of the hair. I'm looking at them in chunks and I'm sectioning them off. So just take a brief look here at my outline because that's really important to notice. That's kind of really key to making a good hair drawing instead of going at it individual hairs at a time. So that might be a little bit hard to look at hair in clumps and clusters like that at first. But this is like the big secret to drawing great hair is sectioning it off in pieces like that. So if there's one key thing that I would really emphasize in this video is retraining your brain to look at things such as hair differently, because that is going to make the difference between a beginner hair drawing and an intermediate or advanced hair drawing. Is looking at it bit by bit, section by section, is going to make a huge difference in your drawing. So getting into this drawing itself, I started with the darks. I started with the 8B graphite pencil first, and I just kind of mapped out those sections first, and I created and laid down a little bit of shading. And now you can see me going in with my paper stump, and I just smoothed out and blended some areas before I go back in with a harder pencil and create some more of those details. When I'm working on my graphite pieces, I like to work in many layers. I'll go in with the darks, I'll blend. Sometimes I'll use the eraser after and pull out some of those highlights and kind of go back and forth that way until I get those base darks, shadows, and then I'll slowly start to build upon that and leave those details for very, very last. Here you can see me using the Mono Zero eraser. It's a great eraser because it's just a couple millimeters thick and you can kind of like use it like a pencil, but in the opposite way, pulling out those highlights. So that particular eraser is great for pulling out small little details such as hair or even fur. If you don't have that type of eraser, I highly recommend investing in one. Otherwise, it can be really difficult to use thicker erasers to pull out really thin highlights like that. Also, here you can see me using a paper stump, really great for blending, and there's many different ways you can blend. I'm using mainly a paper stump in this particular drawing. If you use a Q-tip, that's also really good, but again, we really want to create those fine lines, so a Q-tip would be a little too thick to use for hair. Paper stumps are really inexpensive. You can get them on Amazon or at your art supply store, pretty darn cheap. A great trick when you're using a reference photo and you're using graphite, take that photo and filter it in the black and white. That will really help you bring a little bit more clarity to the actual shading and highlights in that picture, which will help your drawing out tremendously, because then you don't get too confused by the colors, because sometimes when there's dark colors of something, we kind of confuse that for shading. Even though we know it's not, we have a little bit of a harder time drawing it. So when we put something in black and white with our reference photos, it really makes it tremendously easier to draw. Now going to the right side, And that's just my general style and technique that I like to use, is going from left to right because I'm right-handed. So I don't have to rest my hand ever on my finished piece, thus, possibly smudging and smearing it. That's going to really help your pieces stay crisp and clean when you do it that way. So now I'm working on the right side here. I'm going to apply those same techniques as I did on the left side, putting down those darks, blending them, pulling out the highlights with the eraser, going back and forth with this particular technique until I build up my base layers, and slowly but surely adding in those details. As you go from one side to the opposite side, make sure to maintain a consistency in your style and technique. If you're kind of slowly figuring things out and figuring out how to better your technique, and you have one side better than the opposite side, there can be some major inconsistencies there. If this is just for practice, just for study, go ahead and do that. Always better your style. If this is something that you want to present as a gift or in a show or whatever, you want to maintain that consistency in style. That's just going to help the piece look a lot more complete and cohesive. One big mistake I see with beginners is that towards the end of their art piece, they tend to rush through it. And that's a big mistake. You don't want to rush through things. They tend to look muddy and mishmashed together. Really take your time to make your piece look nice from beginning to end. If you're having a frustrating time with your piece, take a break, but don't take too long of a break. Don't take a week or longer. Take a break and come back to it and really enjoy the whole process of your piece, because art can be very relaxing and enjoyable, and if you're feeling frustrated, just step away from it, but don't give up on it and don't rush through it. Here you can see me pulling out the highlights with the Mono Zero eraser. So I think of the eraser just as much as a drawing tool as the graphite pencil. A lot of people just kind of look at the eraser to erase mistakes, but when you use it to pull out highlights, and especially that thin eraser like I'm using here, is going to really give more complexity and realisticness to your drawing. Here I'm using the electric eraser, much in the same way as I mentioned with the Mono Zero eraser. I think the difference between the electric and the Mono Zero eraser, they're both very thin tipped, but the electric eraser can pull off a little bit more of the graphite than the Mono Zero. So if I really want to get some super light highlights, I might use that electric eraser instead. So I am including that earring, mainly because it's overlapping the hair. I thought it would be weird without it. So some good practice there. Once I feel finished with that right side, I'm pretty much going to go over the whole piece now, getting any little details I may have missed, and certainly making everything look a lot more cohesive. Here we are with the finished piece, pulling out that washi tape. Thank you so much, guys, for joining me. Please like, subscribe, and I'll see you next time. Bye.